Well, Debbie, Danielle, thank you for being with me on another episode of AI Calibration Weekly, where we're trying to kind of make sure that people can follow along with the advancements and movements in artificial intelligence without completely putting their head in front of the fire hose. That is the information that's coming out right now. But the three of us plus Stephanie kind of stepped into a little bit of the fire hose this last weekend or so at the Women in AI Summit 2.0 that Kat Moon from Vanderbilt Law put on at Vanderbilt Law. It was a conference focused on, I guess, AI literacy, governance, access to justice, what it means to adopt AI responsibly. Especially in professions like law and healthcare, where the stakes are high for us, right? But what stood out wasn't just kind of technology. It was, and I wrote an article on this. It was the posture, it was the conversations, what came out of this conference, and it was because of who was there. As you can tell, in my mind, it was because of who was there. It was obviously, it's called Women Plus AI. It was obviously a conference that was geared towards, created by, and mainly attended by women who are in the industry, very, very accomplished, powerful women. And I was lucky enough to be one of the very few guys that actually went to this. And it's about 150 women in one room, all passionate and thoughtful and knowledgeable and talking about artificial intelligence. And I wanted to get y'all's thoughts on it now that we've kind of set up what it is. What made this conference, let's go with what made it different first.
So I'd say for me, it was a conference that was not filled with AI experts. There were definitely AI experts there. But pretty much every person I talked to was there with the intent to learn from other people. Even the people who were teaching were there to learn.
Yeah.
Right? It was much more like, let's get in this room and let's talk about how we build, how we solve, how we share, how we collaborate. And that was incredibly powerful. And, the other thing that really struck me, and this happened at an event, a women's ILTA event that I went to, and I'm just now connecting these dots. That room was incredibly diverse. And that's not always what you see at a legal technology conference. And so I don't know what that means. This isn't a scientific study or anything, but I remember turning around and looking around that room and noticing that it was interestingly diverse. And I think that there's that speaks to Kat, her circle of influence and how she brings people together and brings people in. And, not everyone was from legal. A lot of people were from legal. Not everyone was from legal. But it really was a room of people who showed up and said, how do we make each other better?
Yes, I think the diversity struck me as well. And to give a little insight into the type of diversity, we had college students there, law students there. I think last year we had high school students there. I think we still might have had high school students there. This was the age diversity beyond any other diversity was really huge in my mind also. Danielle, what struck you? What made this conference different for you?
I think both you and Debbie make a great point about the diversity that was present in the room and what that brought to the table as far as conversations were concerned. And I also think what made this conference different, at least in my mind, was the fact that we did involve other industries. It was a bit refreshing to sit in a room and hear those perspectives and even identify some of the correlations that we see in the legal profession that some of the women were seeing in the industries in which that they were taking part in and were there to represent. But all in all, the whole day was set up in a way in which we weren't there to just actively learn. We were also there to be true participants in the discussion. And so that was absolutely fabulous to sit there and not just hear from somebody tell us about AI, but actually have true discussions about some of the issues that we're seeing. How do we get more involved? How do we become more impactful? And ultimately, how do we move the needle? What is it that we need to do from a different industry perspective? What is it that we need to do from an individual perspective? And how can we all also grow in our own AI literacy? And so that was refreshing. It felt very empowering to sit there and have those discussions.
Well, and that came from, at the very least, the structure of the conference itself. Like the first sort of things we did were those ACE talks, where it kind of felt like The Price is Right, where people were coming out of the where everybody was sitting out of the audience and giving talks on their experiences with AI, their thoughts with AI. We had some storytelling portions of this. And then from those ACE talks, we went into some, I guess what you would call educational sessions as well. And then I think we ended with, let's build something. Let's create something. So everybody went from we share, we educate, and then we create. And I thought that was not only fascinating, but it really drove a lot of people's experience and how much they participated, I think.
For sure. And I loved that no topic was off limits. We talked about training. We talked about change management. We talked about user adoption. We talked about sustainability. We talked about the mental load that now exists in a different way because those of us who have really embraced AI have an ability to produce things at a volume that is really challenging to keep up with. We talked about, the sweatshirts we got said woman in the loop, right? But connecting the dot on the loop thing, what I have found is the mental load for me means that more loops get opened. And I don't always get to close them, right? Because I create this amazing thing and I'm like, oh, this is going to be amazing. But then 13 other things happen. And then I randomly stumble upon that Claude chat and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I felt like a party of one on that. And I quickly found out that I am in fact not a party of one, that people were like, yes, we're doing so much. We're creating so much. And we're drinking from a fire hose. We're trying to keep up and we're trying to learn. And it was just magical to see us really talking about every part of how AI has impacted and will continue to impact our lives.
Well, so Debbie, but kind of specifically to what you talk about a lot, you talk about leadership and strategic management. How do people then lead with that? Did we get into how does somebody like you, recognizing, okay, well, now the people that I lead are drinking from that fire hose. Were you able to get into any discussions about that, about like how to step in and say, let's put some perspective and some management and some guardrails around this?
Yeah, I mean, the last group that I was in, we talked a lot about that, and we talked about how strategy is much more within our reach now than it once was. And execution seems so far out of our reach, right? Because there's all kinds of ideas and all kinds of strategies. But the humans are still the roadblocks, right? And so if you say, I have these 11 great ideas, people are overwhelmed by that. But if you say, let's try this one thing, and then for those of us who are visionaries and I have a million thoughts and a million great ideas, not everyone who works with me thinks like that. And often my kind of strategy vomit overwhelms people. And so how do we teach people who are building these strategies to stop to execute? And how do you help people through that? Because the people are still the people. They still have emotions. They're still worried about looking like they don't know what they're talking about. They're still worried about all those things. And that's where I think for us as consultants, but also for lawyers, that is where our real value is is how do we get the people through to the next thing? How do we help people execute? And we had a really great discussion about that in our session.
Well, and so I think that's a really good segue to Danielle as well. Danielle, in your experience in kind of helping lawyers actually put this to the road, helping people like bring this sort of thing into their practice, how can lawyers, or did you see something there that said, here's how we in our firms can help introduce our people to artificial intelligence? Because it seems like this conference was making things a little less scary in a very responsible way. We're approaching it from responsible change management, from governance, from ethical standpoints, not just YOLO, let's send it and consequences be damned. So were you seeing something that could give people an idea of how to bring it into their firm safely?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there were lots of discussions surrounding this particular topic and how do we go about maybe even looking at change management from a little bit of a different perspective, given what it is that we're asking people to really come to the water and take a drink and participate in, right? And so thinking about it, from that perspective also maybe of what does ethical leadership look like? If you're somebody who is very much a pace-setting leader who comes in and says, I'm using it and here's all of the great and wonderful things that I'm doing with it. How do you then, though, think about those people who may not be so quick to say, I don't know, maybe we need to take a step back? And a lot of that really focuses on messaging, communication, giving the why behind it, but also addressing what those fears actually are. What is it that people are actually fearing when it comes to AI, and really having those tough conversations with your team? Because failing to acknowledge it in the end, I think we can all agree that if we don't acknowledge it, adoption rate isn't going to be as successful as opposed to if we had those tough conversations. And then I think from a leadership perspective, really taking a step back, and even though some of us are very excited about implementing this immediately, really saying, okay, I should probably think about that as well, and acknowledging it and having a conversation, and then coming to the table collectively together to figure out how do we implement this in a way that considers all of these issues, but still accomplishes the ultimate goal in which we want to accomplish.
I like that. What I'm hearing from both of you here, and I think I saw this in this conference, was a kind of full-faced, look at these are the challenges, and we have to look at them. We have to face them forward. And we had a lot of discussions on what some of the challenges were, and we had a lot of disagreement on what some of the challenges were and why they were there. And I think, to me, that's one of the things that struck me in this room was the different posture. Was let's not run away from this and say, it'll solve itself. It was more, let's actually come up with ways to do this. And so what would you two say to a firm that was saying, okay, I want to start my path in bringing AI into our firm, but I want to do it responsibly? What would be something they could do today? Who do they put in the room? What are the questions they ask? Things like that.
Well, I think they have to start with process and how they get their work done and where the friction is and where the hard things are. Too many firms are starting with the tool, and then they end up with a bunch of tools that don't do what they need them to do. And that's we're seeing that all the time. In fact, I just talked to someone this week in Chicago at an event, and he said, can I hire your firm to come in and help us analyze how much money we're spending on AI tools and how we're using them, and if we've done the right thing? Because we just, like, someone says we should buy this and then we buy it, and now we have all these things and we don't know where the overlap is. Maybe there's a whole industry for figuring all that out, But I was like, absolutely, we'd love to help you with that, because those kinds of engagements really help us learn how firms are making decisions, which there's definitely a better way than just buy all the shiny tools that you see. But I think it
has to be.
Yeah, for sure. It's also really important that And I posted about this on LinkedIn. I was on a call with a firm and I asked about their AI strategy. And the guy said, we aren't going to have one because I'm not going to contribute to the gutting of the legal profession. And that was his like initial right off the bat. And I'd never heard, like, someone hasn't said it that, like, strongly to me. And afterwards I realized, exactly. They're thinking it. And so what I wish I would have said to him, if I would have been fast, and the next time someone says that to me, I have my answer prepared, is what if you could be involved in shaping the future of the legal industry? Because that's what people have the opportunity to do, one firm at a time. And I go back to the AI Calibration Weekly show from a couple of weeks ago where Drew said, firms need to act or they will be subject to the whims of the weather.
Ooh.
It's right. Like, you can dig in and be like, I won't be involved. Okay. You might not be involved. Actually, you might not be involved, period, if that's the decision. Right. So, my point about that is not about that guy. It's about that there's more than just that guy who feels that way. And all of the other challenges that we brought up around billing and pricing and how people get paid and how lawyers get compensated and how we incentivize people and how we measure their performance. AI staring in the face of all of those things is going to require us to think differently.
Absolutely. Debbie, when you told that story about the person who gave the response of not wanting to be involved in the gutting of the profession, I really started to think about that. And as Zack says, right, they're out there. There are people who think that. And when I took a step back, took that commentary and looked at what we discussed at the conference and the summit, and thinking about participating in the process and ensuring that you are bringing your voice to how it is being built, what we're actually utilizing it for, ensuring that there is not things like AI bias that are in place, right? We looked at that from the perspective of women participating in the process and being involved. But when we look at that from people in the legal profession being involved as well, it makes complete and total sense. Particularly for those of us that are like, I don't know how this is going to shape the profession. Is this really going to be for the better? Like, we need those voices at the table participating in that part of the process as well. But the secondary aspect of this that I also think about, and you both know that I spent many years in the regulatory system, and I think about it from the lawyer that says, I'm just not going to use it. I don't want to use it here at our firm. You should still have some literacy, though, around AI. Don't you want to know what opposing counsel is doing? Don't you want to have the ability to understand that maybe how the courts are using it? Don't we have a duty and responsibility to do that on behalf of our clients? So even if you're not going to implement it, having knowledge, having literacy, understanding how it's going to be used, I think is just as important as being a part of the process and bringing your voice to the table.
That's
Danielle,
good.
we're gonna wrap on that, because I think that in my mind, and Debbie, I don't want to speak for you on this, but I think that really, if I were able to pull a thread out of that conference, I would say that's the most centralized thread, is like, you need to have AI literacy, because you need to understand what's going on and be in the room and be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, knowing what's going on around you. Like, you can say no, but most other people are saying yes. And you should know what you're saying no to. And so AI literacy that's whether you're going to use it or not, you got to know about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Great point. Well, Danielle, Debbie, thank you guys for being with me on another episode of AI Calibration Weekly. I really appreciate y'all's thoughts. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Zack.
Thank you.